Hey there, I'm Robbie, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make a pitch for Image Comics, which takes open submissions of comic book projects. This is going to be a little bit more of a deep dive into like how to really get a project like up to the standard of something like Image, which is one of the largest publishers in the industry. If you just wanted the very basic steps, it's really simple, and I can say it from the top of my head. Write a cover letter, write a synopsis, and include minimum 5 pages of functional sequential artwork that is inked and lettered. Pretty easy, or so it sounds, but a lot of the next 40 minutes is me unpacking like reasoning and what people would look for and how to really, go beyond just doing the minimum. Um, I hope it will be useful to you. I've learned a lot along the way, and even just though I am not a professionally published comic book author, I've done a couple, and I do work in the creative industry in a way that, I think in this way. So I just hope it's useful. This is me re-recording the introduction after having done the whole video. So now we're going to get into it. I'm going to just be talking to you a little bit about what it takes to submit your creator-owned comic book project to Image Comics for their submissions. You're probably already aware if you're here, but Image is the largest publisher of creator-owned comic book projects. They've put out such titles as The Walking Dead, Saga, Invincible, Paper Girls, Spawn, and to name some of their largest, but that's not to say that there aren't, plenty of other comic book projects that are by creators who are just trying to cut their teeth. I wanted to talk a little bit about that process and what is required to pull off like an industry standard comic book submission and a proof of concept. But we're going to go a little bit deeper and expound on just like all of the submission requirements and why. If you are creating a comic to submit to a larger publisher, the really only thing that they require of you is a cover letter, a synopsis, and 5 pages of functional artwork, or 6 pages depending on the publisher. They just want to see that you can do it and that like how to tell a cohesive storyline. But that is asking the bare minimum. And so we're going to go a little bit further on that as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over to Image's website, where they very kindly leave all their submission requirements. And we're just going to walk through it because, some of it's pretty self-evident, but maybe not. Image Comics only publishes creator-owned material. We do not contact creators. We do not contract creators. We're only interested in publishing original content for which you would retain all rights. Please do not submit any work that utilizes already existing characters, Image characters, or otherwise, as they will automatically be declined. So, yeah, like Image isn't looking for you to potentially make a Walking Dead spinoff or take over writing for Invincible or something like that. That's not what they're interested in. They're looking for original projects. They're definitely not going to entertain something like a storyline for the MCU. Where Image makes its mark is in like these original stories that are differentiated from the mainstream of comic books, which is to say like Marvel and DC. For the most part, they're really not putting out like superhero storylines to compete with, what has already been a hugely oversaturated market that has like DC has like 52 plus lines of superheroes. So like it's going to be a hard sell if you're working on a comic book project. And again, they just don't want to deal with anything that they don't own the rights to. Image publishes creator owned, creator generated properties, and we don't pay page rates. Image takes a small flat fee off the books published, and it will be the responsibility of creators to determine the division of the remaining pay between their creative team members. So this is pretty important. If you have the product in hand, whether that is a floppy, like the 22-page monthly issue of a comic, or the full trade paperback, or the hardcover 12-issue volume. Image, as a publisher, really just takes the finished material and uses their network to distribute that for you. That's like the big question as a comic book creator. Like, how do I get my comic book into stores and out into the world? That's like why Image exists, right? Like, they have that network already curated of brick and mortar mom and pop comic book shops. They probably know how to do comicsology and all that other stuff that goes into like supporting a real professional comic book. I have tried distributing my own self-published comic book on my own. And, there was a day where I picked up the phone and called all my local shops and, hey, I sold 100 comics that way. That was actually a pretty successful day, but that was like a full day's work just in my local community to make $300, and only got me within like a driving rate, 25-mile driving radius of my house worth of comics. So like, their network is just vastly different than that. When you are chopping down how you pay, like assuming that you are the writer of your comic book, like I am, you are really kind of the proponent. Writers kind of have to wear many hats if they want to be like the creative visionary behind their work, or, like that's like your responsibility to figure out how are you going to pay people. Like you do a lot more than just writing. And that's not to say that like illustrators don't do that. Some people write and illustrate, but if you are here today, I'm telling you right now, if you're here today, like I want to make my comic book project, no one's like going to just do it for you. You are going to have to make your comic and have it done. And then Image is more likely to pick it up. And we'll get to that. But like, again, that 6-page pitch is like, again, asking the bare minimum. Like you're really going to want to go the distance if you want someone to see like a finished product that they want to put resources behind. Things often change from proposal to the printed page. If the intended title of your book is awkward or unwieldy, we may suggest changing it. If your logo is unreadable, we may suggest changing it. There have been cases where we've designed logos, helped redesign characters, and done cover sketches. However, no changes will be made without creator approval. That's a great point. I mean, Image at the end of the day still is like a brand. There still is something like, it still means something to be an Image comic. I feel like they have a pretty, they're diverse, but they still have like a certain kind of like tone to them and a specialty. There are publishers like Dark Horse, which like Dark Horse definitely takes some creator owned stuff, but like a lot of what they do is like licensed comic book adaptations, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something like that, right? Oni is a creator owned, they publish small independent things, but they were like most notable for Scott Pilgrim. And a lot of the Oni books are like similar to that, where they're just like, that like that style and tone is just different. So they do have like a brand presence to uphold, but on top of that, there are like minor things they might want to change. A perfect example is like when Robert Kirkman pitched The Walking Dead, he originally called it Night of the Living Dead. And that was because Night of the Living Dead was in the public domain. Anyone, you, myself, or anyone else, totally has the right to adapt Night of the Living Dead however we want. And so he pitched it as this like black and white drama and like ongoing serialized drama. And what happened was Image was like, well, if you're already telling a news story that's not just literally Night of the Living Dead, why don't you call it something else? Like, why don't we just ensure that you have total creative ownership of that? And so he did, and that's how The Walking Dead came about. Not that this matters much, but like sort of similar with what's happening with like Critical Role and Critical Role and Dungeons and Dragons is just the fact that like they're moving to Daggerheart, like their own proprietary system, because they're like, well, you know, we like now we don't have to worry about licensing this stuff. So totally valid reason for them to ask for a minor change. A logo, that makes sense. Like, you know, your artist can design a logo, but they might not be, you know, like a professional logo designer. So like Image might retain people who can do that and just keep things like in their own style and in their own brand. That's why that might come about. Okay, moving on down to artists. Image accepts inking, penciling, lettering, and coloring samples from artists. So, you know, oddly enough, you can, as an artist, just send yourself for consideration to Image. I don't know what they do with that, but it sounds like they retain it in the event that they need an artist for something. Ironically, they don't accept writing samples. Like, they will not accept a pitch that is just a script or just an idea. You have to be further along than that. And so they will only take the proposal, which comes next. As I mentioned, that's like the 6 pages of artwork, etc. And that's sort of like, it's unfortunate in a way because, you know, again, they're not just asking for a writing proposal. They're asking for a proposal of like finished work, and they want to see that you are going to go the distance with your project, right? Which is like asking a lot because, again, as a writer, yeah, you will probably have to do more than just write. But I'm just saying it now and preparing you if you are someone who really wants to make a comic book project. I've gone through a lot of these motions and am working on getting my own proposal out the door. Proposal requirements. Okay, so now, again, here's what you are going to have to submit. A brief typed cover letter that summarizes your project and your previous work if relevant, contact information, address, phone, email, etc. Submissions are via email only. They actually did used to take physical submissions. That was probably something that ended during COVID, to be realistic. Like, probably something that they were just like, well, we're not in the office anymore. And not to mention, mail takes up a lot of space. But I have sent paper submissions to Image back in the day when that was a thing. A typed 1-page synopsis of the overall story arc, not just the first issue. Please keep this as succinct as possible and do include major plot points and spoilers. Tell us what sets your story apart from other comics and be clear as to who the target audience is. Everyone is not realistic. There's no single book on the market today that everybody buys. You can tell us whether you see it as full color or black and white, a mini series or an ongoing series, a prestige book or an original graphic novel. There are times, however, that we may suggest what format we think will be most successful for your story in the current market. I'm glad I reread that because I actually spent my morning working on the pitch for my book, and there's a lot of stuff that they specifically cite here that I did not include. So I'm going to go back and revisit that, because if someone is asking you for something, you should definitely give everything that they asked for. We're going to cut through this line by line now. A typed 1-page synopsis. That is so hard because I have so much to say about my book, but I'm willing to be up to the challenge to condense it all into 1 page if that's what they really want. And as a writer, that is your challenge. I have seen, you know, discourse on some of the comic book forums that I follow where people are like, well, I'm not really good at writing things, you know, short. And it's like, if you are a writer, you have to be able to do it. You have to be able to tell a story in 1 page, in 1 panel. If you haven't done that yet, go back to the drawing board for a little bit. It's not gatekeeping. it's practice, and you want to be able to refine your craft. And at the same time, I love challenging artists because, I will give my artists a really detailed page and I'll be like, hey, I want to see all of that detail. It's just good. Like, it's good to push your limits like that a little. So don't be afraid of that. As succinct as possible. Include major plot points and spoilers. Yeah, that's just the thing where they don't want the tease. Like, as the publisher and as your business collaborator, Image just wants to have everything ready to go. Again, they want to know that the story you're trying to tell and what it means and everything, like that you have a goal and a vision in mind. And so they just need to be clued in on it, so you don't have to be cheeky. Tell us what sets you apart from other comics and be clear. So yeah, I'm just going to keep going back to the Kirkman stuff because it's like what I know the most. But that was 20 something years ago when The Walking Dead was like before zombies ruled the world. That's funny because that is kind of what they do, but I meant as a pop culture thing. Before zombies ruled the world, Robert Kirkman pitched that book as, again, this the serialized soap opera drama of a zombie outbreak. And his whole thing was I love zombie movies, I just wish they would never end. No one had done this ongoing serialized story. It's a soap opera. It was very different. And it was a character study of Rick Grimes over the course of time, this Walter White style. I start here as this good small town cop, and then I become this crazy dude with one hand who's I say all of this with love for The Walking Dead because I totally was a fanatic about that book back in the day. But so yeah, they just want to know what makes the story unique. And again, a better example might be superheroes. I mentioned that Image, they have some superhero titles, but it's not the bulk of their catalog. Invincible was different because it was the violent superhero book. And not to say there aren't, I know there was the Max series with Marvel, but that was definitely one of the things that set Invincible apart. I haven't read it in quite a while, so I'd love to look back at its original pitch again and to see what else was going on under the hood, but again, differentiated work, some kind of twist, right? Who is the target audience for your book? Everyone is not realistic. That's a great point. Pretty much any product in the world has a demographic. The Walking Dead, again, is the ongoing example, might have been fans of horror and what is that? Things like Heavy Metal Magazine or something, or Fangoria, people who pick that stuff up on the store shelves. That might have been the niche that they were working towards. It's also probably not bad to cite some of what are your influences and similar projects, because that's a way to just be oh, well, fans of Game of Thrones would like my high fantasy novel, or, something, something like that. So just who is it for? It's not going to just go to monolithic success overnight, basically, right? You want to find a comfortable niche of people who are there to support that, because there's just communities of people, whether it's fantasy or crime or mystery or horror. That's the pocket of people you're looking for. You can tell us whether you see it as a full color or a black and white book, a mini series, an ongoing series, a prestige book, an original graphic novel. There are times we may suggest what format we think will be most successful for your story in the current market. So that's a great point. I think that's, for the most part, customarily, people tend to package comic books as the single issue floppy, right? It starts here in 22 pages. It then moves up to a collected trade paperback. It then moves up to a hardcover. In some cases, books like Scott Pilgrim just started as a volume. There was never individual issues of Scott Pilgrim. And then it went on to being colorized hardcovers. And then it went on to being like larger collected, well, I'm not sure if it was omnibuses, but like larger collections that like when you just print that in a bigger collection like that, like it's just cheaper for the publisher. Like there's more margin in it. So that's like, it's interesting they put that in there. I'm curious how often that applies. For instance, like Bone by Jeff Smith started actually as comic monthly issues of the comic, though it did 9 volumes. And now like all Jeff ever wanted out of it was this, like the big chunkering paperback, as he calls it, like that whole collected 1 volume edition of Bone, which is now in its 29th printing, by the way. So that thing is just like the easiest way to collect Bone and get it all out there because it's such a massive story. But yeah, that's been collected in, again, they did colored versions, which I prefer it. I just like the color, even though Jeff didn't do the color. But yeah, so there's a lot of ways that you can dice this up, and there's a lot of reasons for it. Again, just like profit margins. There's actually been a lot of discourse in the comic community lately that like monthly issues are sort of tricky. It's just like, as publishers, like there's not like, again, a tons of margin in selling this issue for $5, or if they even go for $5 still. Comic shop owners feel similarly because, just the people I know who own stores, they find it a lot easier to sell like a $15 or a $20 or $25 trade and just like get someone into a new series right off the rip instead of like trying to get them back every month. Comic book stores lose a lot of money if people don't come and pick up their pull at the end of the month or end of the year. So just a lot of reasons why people might not want to do that. Everyone say hi to Wallace. Hi, Wallace. Yeah, okay. Rub your face on it. Okay, buddy. It's funny because they say photocopies of fully inked and lettered sequential story art pages, but they don't take physical submissions anymore, so I think they just didn't change that. But yeah, like you just want a sequence from your book or like a short story or something that shows how that works. Fully inked and lettered 5 pages minimum. That's a great point. So like, I know that Robert Kirkman's pitch for The Walking Dead was just like 5 pages with Tony Moore, and it was when it was still Night of the Living Dead. And so the art style, or just like the whole thing, is different. Like it's set in the 50s or the 60s. Rick looks a little different. But at the time, Robert Kirkman was still like, he was semi-known, like he was doing Battle Pope, if anyone here remembers Battle Pope. And so he was known at Image. It's really just a formality, in my opinion, that he had to pitch it. But he showed the proof of concept, and they're like, yeah, go ahead, Rob. We trust you. You've done this. If you're sending, I've sent a couple of like the 5-page minimum pitches over to Image and never heard anything back. And that's just the nature of the game. When I did those, they were really, they were early projects I did to try and kind of get the feel of like what it takes to create a comic. And there's a lot that goes into it, like you have, you learn a lot by going through the motions, right? And so I would advise just doing it, if anything, for the sake of practice and learning how to work with an artist and learning how to pitch and market your book, and learning just from making mistakes and from getting rejection or lack of rejection, for that matter, right? But it's definitely something you want to do, just to become familiar with it. a perfect antidote I think I have is when I was starting this book, Cooney, which is not my current project, but when I was doing that book, I did like a 5-page idea and I sent it out and never heard anything back. And I went ahead and did an issue, and I did a second issue, and I was continuing through with that project. There's a lot of reasons why I didn't follow through on it at the time, like first of all, just didn't have tons of expendable income to do the book. But as I look back at it now, like if I had followed through on the 6 issues to have like a collected trade series, I might have repitched it then and been like, hey, this work is done and it's just ready to be out there. And that's like it's more of a low risk investment. Something that was happening at the time. Let me just look this up. Ha! Look at that. That's freaking funny. Okay, so something that was happening at the time that I was working on Cooney, and I was, I made my initial 5 pages of artwork. I crowdfunded to do my issue. I kept it going. I recall this book being like on Kickstarter or even like Imager, but I just remember it because it was like the only creator-owned independent book I saw. So this was done, and look at that, Volume 1, 2019. So it looks like they just did 1 volume of Paradox Girl, but this was like a total grassroots independent comic book that I remember seeing at the time. Starting around 2014 or 2015. And so it wasn't until it looks like here 2019, I thought it got picked up by Top Cow. Maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but nonetheless, they did it issue by issue until they had enough for a collected trade. And look at that. Here it is on Image Comics website. I didn't even know that. I thought it was picked up by Top Cow. Maybe some other acquisition happened in there, but like that's the perfect example of like if I had followed through and done 6 issues of my comic book, even if it took me from 2015 to 2010, 5 years of my life, which sounds like a long time, but it's not. At the end of it, I might have had a collected trade paperback like Paradox Girl has. So like, and that's something that editors are looking for. They want to see that you will follow through and that you're going to make this book anyway. Like if you're going to send the pitch to Image and get their rejection and just decide, okay, well, it's not for me, it wasn't in the cards, like that is the attitude that is going to prevent you from making your comic book. I'm just going to put it that way. So like if you're waiting for someone to give you the opportunity, it's very unlikely it's going to happen. I'd like to make another recommendation here. Brian Michael Bendez's Words for Pictures. This book, I haven't read it in quite a while, but there's a really great scene in it where he brings on friends who are editors for comic book companies, and they just kind of talk about like what they're looking for, and like what really sets people out and like what they want from you in a project. And I thought that was really good. And like one of the clear examples is like what I just touched on is like someone who will persevere and will make the comic happen anyway and just kind of like get it done. That's an attractive quality and was like evidenced with Paradox Girl, where it's like, here it is, like the book is done, it's ready to be distributed, it's a low risk thing, you just have to put it out. That's great for something like Image. It's not great for the creator who probably just wants some assurance that like, oh, like I'm going to make my book and it's going to get out. But like a comic book is an investment. You are going to, whether you're doing Kickstarter or doing, submitting it to Image and then pushing it out, like you are going to have to make it on your own investment and then push forward. This is the same with pretty much any other creative media, films, music, artists really do have to like create the art or the product in this case, and then figure out what to do with it. If you want to be a filmmaker, you do not apply for a job at Warner Brothers and sell your first movie and get $100 million budget. You make a movie, like Christopher Nolan did Following, and he did it on his weekends and just shot it in black and white, probably because it was cheaper, like Kevin Smith when he did Clerks, and did like a very, achievable project to show, hey, I can do this. And now I have this, and okay, you can distribute it, whatever. Usually it's like the next project that's really where you kind of make your bones anyway. But like, that's really the thing I'm trying to say is like, if today your idea is like, I have this epic idea for this like intergalactic space drama, and there's like 1,000 planets, and like I just see that stuff all the time, and all I need is an artist who's willing to believe in me. No, you're gonna have to pay someone for their time. You're gonna have to put your own money into it. You're gonna have to do an uncomfortable amount of work and then come back and do the project. If you can do it the other way and someone's just willing to give you tens of thousands of dollars to pursue your creative vision, awesome, and I'm happy for you. But if you're like the rest of us, the hard truth is like, yeah, you're just gonna have to make this comic on your own investment, and I hope you do it. And like, I hope that someone will see what you did and give you the chance you were waiting for based on what you saw through to execution and created successfully. So going back real quick, let's see if there's anything else before we're done here. A cover mock-up. They just want that to know that you've designed principles in mind, and like you know how to kind of market things and like give an impression of your book. We just did a cover today that I've had in my mind forever. I don't know that I'm ready to reveal it, but it was like just a good way to give the impression tonally of what my book like is and was and meant. Email submissions to Image Comics. If you don't hear back within a month, keep moving forward. That's my only advice. Things to keep in mind. The creative team in your pitch is the one we expect to see actually working on your book. If the artist you pitched with leaves the team, you'll need to resubmit your proposal with a new creative team lineup. This also means ongoing titles need to be aware. So I don't want this, contrary to what Image requests, don't let this get in your way too much. Like if you have an artist that you're happy with the work, go forward and do it. An example here is like Robert Kirkman and Tony Moore only did like 1, maybe 2 volumes of The Walking Dead together. And then after a volume, it switched over to Charlie Adlard. That's fine. It happens, especially if you're doing something like serialized. If you're just doing 1 volume, yeah, you're going to have to get, the artist is going to have to be consistent the whole way through. But like if you're doing something that's going to go on over the course of time, like you don't have to commit to this relationship for like the next 10 years today. But yeah, like if you did like issue 1 with one artist and issue 2 with a different artist, you're going to probably want to go back to issue 1 and redo the artwork. A lot of people, I think, will start doing things kind of piecemeal and just like figuring this out. Like when you're getting into your first project, like that sort of turbulence is something you want to iron out before you move forward to your official pitch, so just make sure there's consistency, give them confidence that like you are, funding this book and keeping things consistent. And, other than that, yeah, and obviously don't change the nature of the artwork too dramatically if you do change artists, but don't take that as like, I can't change artists ever. Do not hand Image Comics employees submissions at comic book conventions. Yeah, just it's uncomfortable. They're not the ones who are like officers of the company who are reviewing submissions most likely. So just don't, they have an official portal here that they kindly provided. And if you've done the criteria right, they'll consider you. Due to a high volume of submissions, we're unable to respond to each proposal individually. If you not within 1 month, consider your proposal declined. If you include an email addressing your proposal, it'll be automatically declined. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Do not include praise or testimonials. Boo. What if Stan Lee himself wrote me a very nice letter of recommendation? We are only interested in your work as it stands on its own merits. That's fine. Okay. I have no color commentary. We are not looking for a specific genre of comic book. We are looking for comics that are well written, well drawn by people who are dedicated and can meet deadlines. I think I said plenty that led up to this. If you have like a new original idea, if you think that you've like really put yourself through like what is like, Image is like kind of the cream of the crop when it comes to an independent comic book publisher. I mean, there's certainly plenty of others, but like, you can start out smaller and you can do other stuff. Like if you're still just trying to get your feet wet, you can do like anthologies and other areas to get your work out first before going all the way to Image, or a similar publisher like Oni or Fantagraphics or wherever. But there's more options than just going straight to this publisher and like getting the rejection and then just never trying again. Finally, since Image Comics owns no intellectual properties, you can be rest assured, accept it or not, your property will remain yours. It's a really good point to make. Image doesn't own any IP. They don't own Walking Dead or Invincible. Skybound does. Skybound's very successful company, and they own creative properties, and they make comics and license it for video games and TV shows. And I just keep citing this reference because it's one of the prime examples. But yeah, like Robert Kirkman made a very successful company out of his creative endeavors. It's all his. Image just takes a portion of book sales, which is really cool. And like the last thing I'm going to touch on again is like, especially if you have like a finished book that's like good and functional and like you did all the work, that's where like the risk of getting a rejection, I think, is greatly reduced. And why I said at the top of this video that like the 6 pages of artwork is the minimum that they're asking for. But if you can do more, if you can do a first issue as your proof of concept, if you can show them the volume is done and it's just ready, even better. So that's all I really got for today. I am not a total professional at this. I don't have a published comic book yet, but it's something I'm intending to do, and I'm following these steps, and I'm kind of just doing these videos as part of my journey in that. I've had the good fortune to meet other people in my situation or professionals who shared their advice with me. So I'd really like to keep doing more of these videos. So if you thought this was helpful, if you enjoyed it, please let me know. You can leave a comment, you can share this, you can engage in some way, but like, I'd really like to keep the discussion going. I don't think I'm by no means the authority on this. I don't think I got everything right. I don't claim to have gotten everything right. So, don't flame me if I got something wrong, but like, let's talk about it. So, guys, I appreciate this. I just wanted to share my thoughts. I've, been trying to make a comic book for a little while. I'm starting on a new project with an artist who I really like, and took a lot of years to get to a place where I felt comfortable with this, and that's it. So you can find me on Instagram at Robbie Puzz. YouTube, I think, is just creator-owned comics. It's been a while. So I wish you luck, and thanks for watching. Take care.